So because I'm constantly trying to understand people, it helps me remember and retain the information about them more. This is such an underrated skill. When it comes to responsiveness, when we are having conversations with people, what happens is that in order for someone to be excellent in connecting with people, and it could be online or offline, the two qualities that I look for personally, and the people who are thinking like me, value conversations and actually genuinely curious about getting to know people and understanding their experience. If there is responsiveness and continuity, then we start trusting and leaning more into a conversation with people. If there is lack of responsiveness and lack of continuity, is when the trust is starting to erode. Okay? And I want to talk about both of it today in this episode, and perhaps help you understand how it looks like more in practice, and what are the ways that you can also make sure that you stay responsive and you maintain continuity over time. There's a different energy between having to be in conversation and having it to be an exploration versus when someone is in conversation with you, it seems as though they are with you, but they constantly stir the conversation back to their own agendas. And this feels completely different on text message and in person as well. It's the same kind of underlying mechanism, and everyone can pick up on it right away. Now, when it comes to responsiveness, when we are having conversations with people, what happens is that you say something, I hear what you say, and I reflect on what you say, and I respond to what you said. And each time, it's almost like we're building on each other in the conversation. Now, it doesn't mean that you cannot have certain things you're curious about or questions that you want to ask, but if they naturally emerge in the conversation versus you're trying to force an agenda, is a completely different vibe. One of the things I love about having conversations with great minds who are thinking in a way that is in alignment with the way I experience conversations with responsiveness is that there isn't so much of a competition of, hey, let me tell you how awesome I am, and I'm going to acknowledge you, but then let me tell you about me, like you waiting for your turn to speak. Versus you say something and then they say what they think of that, and then you build on that. And so what ends up happening in this, and I have this flow of conversation with people in the podcast, when we build on each other, and I can get lost in conversations with people, not just podcasts, but in person, because when you say something, I reflect on it, and that makes me think of this, and that makes you think of this, and the arc is flowing like water. There is no resistance. You can always put more structure and be like, actually, let's go back to the main topic of this, or actually, I would really want us to talk about this. Like, you can always stir, but it doesn't become this rigid thing when you're trying to force someone into your framework because you are running the script on them. So responsiveness to me is a quality in which I pay attention to what you say and I respond to what you say. Many times when there are certain things I want to express to someone, maybe there's something about their work I would want to express. But what I have learned to do is, instead of inserting that observation out of the blue in a conversation, I wait until it becomes relevant. What I've started observing is that I almost log mentally observations in my head about certain people. So, and it's not just that people I admire. I in general log things and observations about people. That's how I work. I see something, I kind of log it in the back of my mind, and I just let it go dormant. And that whenever the context activates that observation, I move that observation forward and express that. For example, I have a friend that we're going to shoot a podcast next week. And in this podcast episode, we are going to talk about connecting with people and building businesses internationally. But what has been interesting for me is that I've noticed this person have been putting a lot of effort into creating quality marketing videos and just really putting so much effort into doing something really well. I told him, I actually observed this about you because I've seen your marketing videos, and I thought to myself, whoa, this person, if he does something, he does it fully. And I logged that observation a while ago. But when we are sitting in front of each other in conversation and this comes up, I'm like, you know what? There's something I observed about you. And just delivering that insight, now the person goes, oh, yeah, actually, that's so true. But do you see how I knew that about the person. I didn't start saying, hey, by the way, I observed something about you. Let me tell you all about it. It's more so of, okay, we are in conversation. Somehow it comes up in the context, and that reminds me of an observation I heard from you. Now that's responsiveness, and it's subtle, right? That you could argue that it's not just that you say something, I say something, you say something, and it's a reaction of what you said, but also I can have observations about a person, and I can activate those observations and bring them to the forefront if the conversational context is ripe and ready. And usually, and if that is the moment in which the message can land better, because if I was to tell this person out of the blue, hey, by the way, I observe that you're doing things at a high standards, it could land still if the context is friendly and you have a rapport with each other, but it lands so much more strongly if the context is already, we're talking about podcasting. And that reminds me of the fact that I observed with you, because when I watch those marketing videos, here's what I've seen, and that makes me think of that your standards are high. And he goes, exactly. And he explains to me why and what's his reasoning. So responsiveness, in a way, that's how it shows up in a conversation. So it could either be a responsiveness in terms of I'm with you on the thread and we are following the same thread and we each kind of build on each other. It's emergent. Things are emergent in conversation. Versus someone is trying to stir the conversation because they have their own agendas. It feels completely different. So continuity essentially is the ability to remember and to pay attention to what people are actually saying to you, and able to retain that across conversations. So a continuity piece would be something you mentioned once about you, and I remember that. And whenever there is a moment in which this becomes relevant again, I will weave that into conversation. And it's not because I want you to feel like I paid attention, but because I've been keeping a thread alive across time and across all conversations. So whenever you come to a conversation with me, you come to a conversation with the version of me that you remember. So it's not like you're coming and talking to a brand new version, like having, the movie The 51st Dates with Drew Barrymore and Adam Sandler. It's not like that moment of, hi, how are you? Let me tell you about what I do. And then the next conversation, you forget everything that I told you. And then, oh, hi, how are you? Let me tell you about what I do, right? So continuity is essentially that you told me once, I was there with you, whether in text or in person, and I remember that. And I remember that across conversations. So every time I come to talk to you, I arrive with that understanding of you that I learned from you, either because you told me or I just picked up on it. So that's continuity. And it signals that the other person cares, the other person has been paying attention, and the other person is investing in a way that they keep a thread alive of you over time. And to me, this is conversational excellence, because when you're able to keep the continuity of someone over time, and it's not like I have to explain to you from zero what I do every time, or it's not like, oh, I actually already told you about this. Why are you asking me this again? Like, even if you sometimes forget small details, like it can happen that the conversations are spaced out, and perhaps there are some certain details you forget. What I like to do in this scenario, when I don't remember specific details, I ask a question and I say, oh, I think you told me about this over time, but I may have been mixing it up. And the person would jump in and say, yes, actually, or no, here's what I meant. So I still keep the thread of continuity, even if I don't remember the specific details of what the person was saying. I still have a vague memory or an impression in which I remember this person, and I help bring that back, and almost the person illuminates that back to me. And now I update my model of you and with more clarity. So this is such an underrated skill, and a very human-to-human skill, to be able to keep the threads of someone alive in you across time and conversation. And the way I like to do this, and the way I can do this across time with multiple people, is by building an internal model of who they are. And so the model that I'm building is, think of it like people as puzzles. And every single time you kind of add a piece of puzzle and you walk away from the picture, you zoom out and you suddenly see like a picture forming. That's kind of how I see people, in a way that I want to understand them to a way that I can have a coherent model of who they are. And I use certain ways to map them out. I map them out based on what they do. I map them based on who they are. I map them based on their values. I map them based on their behaviors. And every single time, the picture gets clearer, the model gets updated. And sometimes, and this is also true, but sometimes I would have an impression, like a picture that I'm building about this person, that I think is accurate, like an internal model of the person, only then to getting information from reality from them, so that I can immediately update it and switch it. Like, I sometimes had an internal model of someone, and when new evidence and proof came to my awareness, whether it was more context about who they are or their values, that immediately updated the model of who they are. So because I'm constantly trying to understand people and have an understanding and building that entire model of people, that gets updated every time, the picture gets sharper and clearer. It helps me remember and retain the information about them more. So it's not just an interaction, it's this constant model building of humans, so that the accurate understanding and accurate seeing can happen. And always letting myself be proven wrong and updating the model if I get new pieces of evidence. So I can even have a model in my mind about the person based on impressions or conversations, and one piece of information can disprove the entire model. I'm willing to update from zero and start from there. Let's just recap what we talked about today. The first thing that we talked about today was about what are certain qualities that make someone an excellent conversationalist, someone who can build connections with people with ease, and someone who's actually an enjoyable person to talk to. The very first quality in my mind that makes someone that excellent conversationalist is their responsiveness. Responsiveness into you, the situation, what has been happening, and building the thread together as if you both see something emerge in real time and you can both add your insights, but you're building towards something together and let the conversation flow naturally. Now, that this doesn't mean that you cannot put in structures or you cannot have questions that you are curious about. It means that you're not over-structuring a conversation in which you make the other person feel like you have an agenda, or you trying to stir to somewhere where the other person did not agree to be. That's the very first quality to me. A second very important quality to be excellent in conversations is continuity. Being able to maintain or build some sort of internal model of people in which they feel like you have been paying attention. And I'm not saying it from the external, like, how can I make someone feel like I've been paying attention? No. You actually have been paying attention because that's something that's important to you, because your own values of people is accurate understanding, not because you want something out of the conversation, not because you want to be like, look how amazing I am. No, but because that's who you are. You're naturally curious about understanding people, and you're naturally curious about accurately understanding people. And that way that manifests is on a day-to-day conversation. You continue to keep threads of people. And this is something I want to say in sales conversation happens a lot of the times. If you're in business of sales and there is an initial communication person that is doing the outreach, like let's say an appointment setter, and then you arrive into a sales conversation with a different person and there's no overlay and communication between the two people, and you're having to explain to the person something that you explained to someone else, they were not tracking the thread correctly, and it makes you feel unseen. It makes you feel like, whoa, I now have to explain to you from zero, even though I already kind of said. Instead of the person arriving to a call prepared and saying, okay, my colleague told me about your situation, and here's what I understood. Help me see if I understood you correctly. Don't you think that experience would have been different? Because from the beginning, you felt like you've been paid attention to, like you paying attention to across conversation, even if this was on a different person. And like I said many times, especially when we are getting to know people and we explain something to them, we assume that they would ask those questions because they genuinely are curious and they care, right? And whenever we bump against with, you just asked me that, like I remember the conversation that I had over text message. It makes the other person feel like, whoa, like, why did I say that to you? I thought you paid attention. If you can't pay attention because you have a long-term memory problem, you can make sure you take notes, right? You can use your systems, you can use Excel sheets, you can use a way of keeping tracks of people. If you really have a lot of conversation and kind of people blur into together, you can actually find ways. And if you know that you have a hard time keeping the threads with people, you can actually put a conscious effort into putting notes or reminding yourself, or like having systems in which help you retain information about people. If you know that's naturally not who you are, because you care about giving them an experience in which they feel seen, understood, and cared about. Okay? So that's it for the riff of today. I hope this was helpful. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I see you guys next time.